Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're continuing our journey into the mind of Hakim Abu Qasim Ferdowsi, but we're doing something a bit different.
All right.
Yeah, we're not just looking at the grand sweep of his epic Shahnameh. We're really zooming in on the very beginning, those first few lines.
The opening verses, right?
Exactly. To uncover the really profound philosophical foundation he laid down right at the start. This whole deep dive, it's built on insights from conversations with some esteemed Iranian philosophers, Dr. Ebrahim Dinani, Dr. Esmail Mansouri Larijani.
Really insightful perspectives.
They offer such a unique lens on this massive work. And this is actually episode 3 in our series, looking into Ferdowsi's philosophical legacy.
And just before we jump right in, it's probably good to mention the usual note.
Good point.
This is a translation, and it's a reproduction of conversations with Iranian philosophers, like Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani we mentioned. So some concepts, maybe some details, might not be perfectly conveyed in English.
Yeah, translation always has its challenges.
It does. So we apologize in advance if there are any discrepancies. And your feedback, any suggestions you have for improvement, they're always really welcome.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. It's kind of surprising, or it was for me anyway, when I first got into these discussions.
Well, it was.
Well, that the Shahnameh, which everyone knows as this huge, epic, heroes, battles, this grand Hamasa full of national spirit, it doesn't actually kick off with a clash of swords.
No, not at all.
It starts with this incredibly deep philosophical reflection. It's the philosophers even call it epic philosophy.
That's a great term for it.
And that's what we want to unpack today, right? How philosophy isn't just like sprinkled in. It seems woven into the very fabric from word one.
That's exactly the insight here. Ferdowsi, he isn't just a storyteller. He's this pivotal figure, isn't he? In Persian history, language, culture, they call him hakim.
Hakim, meaning a sage, a wise philosopher.
Precisely. And the Shahnameh, well, through their eyes, it's not just history, it's not just poetry. They use this specific term, muhakat.
Muhakat. Okay, how should we think about that? What's the simple way to grasp it?
Well, think of it less like simple imitation or just, recounting facts like a chronicle.
Yeah.
It's more like a truthful and poetic and epic way of representing reality.
Okay, so it's using poetry and epic scale.
To get at truth, not just copying how things look on the surface. It's a really profound way to engage with what's real. And Ferdowsi, he was the first great Persian Hamasa Saray.
The master epic poet, the one who really brought this form to life in Persian.
Exactly. He set the standard.
That helps a lot. So let's stick with Hamasa itself for a second. We usually think epic means, big scale, heroes, major events. But what's the philosophical angle they bring?
This is really central for them. They argue that only humans are capable of true epic language.
Only humans? Why is that?
Because humans are uniquely, the term they use is senio-aspirational. We have ideals, right? We strive for something more, something greater than just survival.
Okay, we aim high. And to actually go for those high aims, those aspirations.
That takes courage. Real courage. Kherad, as they'd say. So Hamasa, the epic form, they define it as expressing the greatest human aspirations through the most courageous actions.
Wow. So it's that combination, the high ideal and the brave pursuit.
Exactly. So that fusion, we've sort of touched before on the ingredients, right? Feeling, intellect, Aql.
Yeah.
That courage. And they add, for Ferdowsi specifically, that crucial element of national fervor, maybe Iranianness.
Got it. Now, they draw this really interesting contrast, and I think this helps place Ferdowsi's work philosophically. They compare his Hamasa to classical Greek literature, specifically tragedy.
Yes, exactly. Because Greek tragedy, Homer, Sophocles, that was the dominant, powerful literary form in, well, the major opposing civilization at the time.
Right. So what's the defining feature of that Greek tragedy in this comparison?
Well, Greek tragedy, as they see it, it often revolves around human conflict with destiny or, with a whole pantheon of polytheistic gods. It frequently involves this clash between two things that both seem right, two perceived rights colliding, which then leads almost inevitably to catastrophe.
Like Oedipus, maybe, or Antigone, human will hitting up against fate or the gods' decree.
Exactly, that kind of unavoidable, often devastating conflict.
So human versus fate, or human versus these multiple divine powers, how does the Shahnameh's epic approach things differently? What's the fundamental difference?
The absolute core difference they stress is to it, the absolute unity of God.
Monotheism.
Yes, fundamentally. Shahnameh, from start to finish, is soaked in monotheism. So if you see conflict, if there's tragedy in Ferdowsi's epic, and there certainly is, it's not presented as a battle between gods or humans fighting a fate dealt by capricious gods.
So what's the main conflict then?
It's primarily framed as the struggle between the principle of good Yazdan, who's seen here more like an angelic force maybe.
A benevolent force.
Right. And the principle of evil, Ahriman.
And crucially, where does God fit in? God is presented as transcendent, right? Above even Yazdan and Ahriman.
Precisely. God is beyond that duality of good and evil that plays out in creation. God is beyond the forces acting within the world. And that transcendence, that's what really sets Ferdowsi's framework apart from polytheistic ones, where the gods are often flawed or tangled up in worldly affairs.
That's a huge distinction, and they touch on something else, something fascinating, a possible link, maybe an indirect one, to a much later Western idea.
Ah, yes, they do briefly mention this idea of the complete human, the insane camel.
Right.
You see it embodied in figures like Rostam, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
or the title Shiri Koda, Lion of God, which refers to Ali. And they draw this potential connection, maybe indirect, like you said, to Nietzsche's Übermensch, the Superman.
Wow.
Now, they're quick to acknowledge the frameworks are totally different, monotheistic versus, well, not. But they highlight this shared sort of idea, this exploration of a pinnacle of human potential or achievement. It's definitely a provocative thought they put out there.
It really is. So, wrapping up this comparison part, their analysis basically says that the monotheistic core makes Ferdowsi's Hamasa philosophically deeper, maybe superior.
That's essentially their conclusion, yes.
Yeah.
Applying this powerful epic form not just to human drama, but to the ultimate reality of divine unity gives it a kind of philosophical depth that you just don't find in epics rooted in polytheism or, arbitrary fate.
Okay, right. That sets the stage perfectly. Let's dive right into those opening lines then. This is where that epic philosophy really kicks off. The very first line, "In the name of the Lord of life and wisdom."
That thought cannot pass beyond this. Bam, right there.
Life, yan, and wisdom, kherad. What's the connection they highlight there?
They stress that life yan is inherently linked to and really guided by wisdom, intellect, kherad, or aql. Life finds its proper direction, its meaning, through the light that wisdom provides.
But then straight away, that thought cannot pass beyond this.
That's the first boundary marker, isn't it? Ferdowsi immediately says, look, the ultimate reality, God, is beyond our conceptual thought, our indicia. Our minds, however powerful we think they are, they hit a wall when they try to directly grasp the divine essence.
Like trying to hold the ocean in a cup, you said before.
Exactly that kind of idea. You can experience the water, know its nature in a way, but you can't contain the whole thing.
And he hammers that point home about our limits, talking about our senses too. The viewer cannot see the creator. Don't torment the two viewers' eyes.
Yeah, and that's such a clear echo of the Quranic story, right? About Moses asking to see God directly and being told, basically, not in this realm. Our physical senses, our eyes, they're built for the material world.
You're limited.
Inherently limited. They just can't perceive the transcendent divine.
Okay, but then comes this point that I found really, mind-bending. It connects to that Quranic verse. Our vision does not perceive him, but he perceives vision. How did the philosophers unpack that in Ferdowsi's context?
Ah, yeah. This is where it gets really deep. It's not just saying God sees everything we see, objects, people, the stars.
Right.
It's saying he perceives the very reality of seeing itself, the fundamental nature of perception, the underlying reality of existence that even makes perception possible in the first place.
Whoa. So our ability to see, to perceive, it depends on his absolute perception of the reality of seeing.
Exactly. It's like our perception is a reflection or maybe a manifestation of his absolute foundational perception of reality itself. It takes perception beyond just a physical thing our eyes do.
It's just metaphysical.
Deeply metaphysical, yes. And it shows why our senses aren't enough on their own. They need the guidance of intellect also, because they can't possibly grasp this deeper dimension alone.
This all points back to God's transcendence, which Ferdowsi stresses with phrases like Lord of Name, Sahibi Nam, and Lord of Place, Sahiba J.
Higher than name and sign and conjecture.
Oh, that's right.
Lord of name that points to God's attributes, his beautiful names, the Ozma.
Merciful, powerful, knowing.
Exactly. Those names describe aspects of reality and his relation to it. Lord of place points to God as the ultimate ground of being, the source from which everything exists.
Mm-hmm.
But then higher than name and sign and conjecture, meaning all the tools we use to think about things in the world, names, labels, concepts, our indicia, they fall short when it comes to the divine essence, the dot.
It's beyond our category.
Utterly beyond. Any label, any concept our finite minds can come up with, it just can't capture the unconditioned reality of God's essence.
And there's that philosophical idea that the attributes are the essence. How does that fit, simply?
Well, if the essence itself is beyond our grasp and the attributes like mercy or knowledge are identical to that essence, then even our understanding of those attributes is based on our limited human viewpoint, isn't it?
Right. We only see reflections.
Glimpses, reflections, not the absolute reality of, say, mercy as it exists in the divine essence itself.
Okay. Then he mentions the creator of the elevated jewel, Gohari Bash. And the philosophers see this as a really specific, very significant reference.
Hugely significant, yes. For them, this elevated jewel is a direct poetic way of referring to the First Intellect, Aql-e Awwal.
The First Intellect.
And this connects directly to a really foundational hadith, a saying in Islamic thought. The first thing God created was the intellect. So by placing the creation of the intellect right here at the very start of his epic,
Ferdowsi is linking his work to this deep cosmology. He's saying intellect is primary in creation.
exactly, he's embedding that philosophical principle right into the opening lines.
So intellect first, and then comes language sown.
Yes. The lines then talk about how language is what brings thought out into the open. Something like, whatever passes beyond these jewels, meaning the intellect, finds neither the way of life nor wisdom. And then wisdom, if it chooses speech, it praises only what it sees.
So language sown, it's the vehicle for thought, Andisha.
Right. You can't really articulate something you haven't first conceived in your mind. Language expresses thought, but it's also, limited by the scope of that thought.
It's the tool we use to build things from our thoughts, isn't it?
Absolutely. Any human creation, whether it's a scientific theory or a skyscraper, it starts with a concept that gets shaped through language or some kind of symbolic system.
But they also stress something about the origin of language itself.
Yeah, the divine origin of the capacity for language. It's not just that we invent words, the underlying ability to handle universal concepts, to combine meanings in complex ways, grammar, syntax, they see that as innate.
A divine gift.
A divine gift, yes. Connecting to ideas in the Quran about God teaching Adam the names, teaching expression, bayan. So this capacity to deal with universals makes language itself metaphysical, not just, sounds we make.
It's not just a human tool we invented, but a faculty given to us.
Precisely their point.
Okay. And Ferdowsi goes on to describe intellect as the ultimate measure. He uses words like sanjad, mizan, intellect, wisdom, and life it measures. Sanjad.
Right, sanjad. It means measured, weighed, ordered. The philosophers really seize on this. They see intellect, aql, as the ultimate scale, the fundamental measure, the mizan of reality.
The ultimate scale.
Yeah, think about it. Any system of order we create, any standard of measurement we use, where does its validity come from? It comes from the intellect that conceived it and applies it.
So intellect is the foundation for all order in our minds and maybe in the universe too.
Exactly. It's the basis for all nizam, all order. And this links straight into the idea of creation itself, not just being about things existing, but about establishing order. God isn't just the creator, Khalik. He's also the organizer, Munazim.
Ah, the one who puts things in order.
Yes. And this cosmic order is seen as rational. It makes sense. And justice, Adl, requires intellect too, doesn't it? You need that discerning power of intellect to establish what's just. So the universal intellect is like the blueprint, the ultimate measure for this rational, just order.
It all ties together so tightly. Then comes that really famous line, wise, Dana, is the one who is powerful. Tavana. From knowledge, the old heart becomes young.
Dana Tavanist. Wisdom is power. That's such a profound statement, ethically and practically. Real power, genuine capability, Tavana, stems from knowledge, Dana.
So power without wisdom is?
Just brute force, maybe.
Yeah.
Potentially destructive or just ineffective. The real power to, say, create something lasting, or to lead others effectively, or guide them meaningfully, that's rooted in understanding, in knowledge, in wisdom.
It's not power over people, but capability from wisdom.
That's a great way to put it. Capability, efficacy. And that second part, from knowledge, the old heart becomes young.
Yeah, what about that?
That speaks to who a true guide is, a peer. A real guide isn't defined just by how many years they've lived. They're defined by their wisdom, their dinai. It's knowledge that keeps the heart alive, vibrant, perceptive, truly capable of guiding others toward what's true and good.
Okay, so we've gone through the limits of thought, the limits of senses, the nature of language, the primacy of intellect as the measure, the link between wisdom and true power. What's the final step? Where does Ferdowsi lead us in these opening verses?
Well, it all culminates in Bandegi, servitude,
Right.
or obediyat, which is often translated as worship.
Servitude.
Yeah. After acknowledging that all our human tools, our thought, our senses, our language, are ultimately insufficient to fully grasp or adequately praise the Creator, the necessary response is to recognize God's absolute reality and our own limitation. It's about tying the waist of servitude, as the poem says.
Servitude. That can sound a bit, I don't know, passive? Humbling, maybe? But the philosophers see something much more profound there, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not about just going through the motions of ritual, not primarily. It's that deep conscious realization, that acceptance of our absolute dependence, our fundamental inability to reach the divine essence, the dot, by our own scheme, by our own intellect alone.
So fully accepting that limitation is the act of worship here.
In this deep philosophical sense, yes. And here's the paradox they really emphasize, which is so central to mystical thought, to Irfan.
Okay.
This very realization, this confession of utter helplessness before the absolute, that's seen as both the necessary starting point and the absolute highest peak of genuine knowledge, of marifa.
Wow, okay, hold on. The highest point of knowing is knowing you cannot fully know the absolute essence.
Precisely. It's an incredible turn, isn't it? It connects directly to that famous mystical saying, servitude is a jewel whose essence is lordship.
Servitude is a jewel whose essence is lordship. How does that work?
By fully, truly embracing your own limited, contingent, dependent reality, that servitude, you paradoxically start to get a glimpse of the nature of absolute, independent reality that's lordship. It's through knowing your own essential nothingness relative to God that you begin to perceive his allness.
And this links all the way back to the purpose of creation itself, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. You know that often cited Quranic verse, I did not create the jinn and humans except that they may worship me, Abadan. Well, philosophically and mystically, that's very often interpreted as meaning that they may know me, Irfan. So worship, ubudiyat, isn't just seen as a command from outside. It's the natural result, the necessary expression that flows from attaining deep knowledge, Irfan, of your true place in the cosmos relative to the divine. Knowing leads inevitably to worship.
It's astonishing how much Ferdowsi packed in there. A whole system, really. Theology, how we know things, the structure of the cosmos, ethics, mysticism, all in just a few opening lines.
It really shows you why he earned that title, Hakim. Sage philosopher. He wasn't just, kicking off a national story. He was grounding the entire epic in this incredibly profound spiritual and intellectual foundation.
And shaping the Persian language itself to be able to carry that weight.
An immense achievement. A true testament to the power of intellect, wisdom, and language when they're guided by that kind of profound vision.
Definitely. Okay, as we start to wrap up this deep dive into the philosophical bedrock of the Shahnameh's opening, here's maybe a thought for you, the listener, to take away. We've explored this idea, right, that recognizing our own limits, acknowledging our inability to fully grasp the ultimate reality, that this can actually be seen as the highest form of knowing, the deepest kind of connection. So think about an area in your own life. Maybe it's a complex challenge you're facing, a difficult relationship, maybe just a big question about the world where you feel limited, uncertain, unable to fully understand it or achieve what you want.
We all have those areas.
Exactly. So how might consciously embracing that feeling of limitation, that sense of, let's call it humble servitude, before the sheer complexity or vastness of it, how might that actually open up a different kind of insight, maybe a deeper connection, or even a new path forward that you might completely miss if you were just focused on trying to conquer it, or figure it all out with, brute force or intellect alone?
That's a powerful perspective shift to consider, isn't it?
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.